Well, welcome, Founder-Led Sales. Another interview. Awesome founder. This is an exciting one today. Charlie Cowley, first founder I advised formally. Pretty exciting. Introduced by Harry Stebbings back when he had founded Impala years ago. Excited to dive in with you today, Charlie. Thanks for joining us, man.
Mate, excited to be here. Yeah, it was a while ago. Was it 7, 8 years ago?
It was. But we'll
Yeah,
skip
back,
over
back.
the stories that you have from those days.
Yeah. We're no excited, mate, to dig into things.
Awesome. Well, as I mentioned, Charlie's a two-time founder. First company was Impala 7, 8 years ago, and recently was so passionate about founder-led sales, so passionate about go-to-market, has founded a new company, Dream, that we'll be talking about today, which is very unique, and I'm excited to learn more. You want to kick it off, Charlie, and tell us a bit about your new company, Dream?
Yeah, for sure. So Dream is an AI go-to-market agent for SMBs. So essentially giving small and medium-sized businesses the tech stacks, the resources that best-in-class go-to-market teams at large corps are used to having. So think of sort of account enrichment, omni-channel outreach, tracking, retargeting, all the kind of things that those best-in-class teams get access to. These small and medium-sized businesses now have that ability to compete and sort of drive new business in markets where previously they couldn't. And I guess like where we're targeting, like sort of from a niche perspective, is we're taking a sort of vertical by vertical approach. So starting out with SMBs in the FMCG and travel space, which really gives us the ability to train the system and put in place specific tooling and requirements for those companies that ultimately sets us apart from the generic sales tooling on the market.
I love it. It's exciting. And as we get deeper into AI and AI sales, this is a bit of a teaser. I was getting some context from Charlie before we started on how many salespeople he has. And he said, no, Seth, sales agents, no humans yet. He's the founder, the founder-led sales, solo salesperson.
With the headset on.
Yeah. So we'll get there. But going back to the genesis, what was kind of the initial thesis of the company, and then how did you start kind of testing the idea to know if you had product market fitness or something you should go kind of all in on?
Yeah, I think ultimately it was a lot of it based on prior experience. We in the last company we built a big team, had a team of 35 SDRs at one point. There was contracting with hotels on a global basis, and really coming out of that business, one of the things we saw that this introduction of AI and agentic technology is that the specific areas where if you can handle really sort of a lot of repetitive kind of tasks in a much more measured way and sort of more applicable sort of in a sense where you can drive real value rather than real value from being able to target 2,000 restaurants across the UK or be able to target hotels on a global basis, then actually that there is a use case there that we felt personally that you can really start to build on top of. And so we started looking at the technology behind the scenes. We started testing in terms of from our own perspective on driving Dreams outreach, like with the very first sort of beta version of the platform, and then really having conversations with our network and driving initial interest that way.
So let's talk about that for a second, because one of the misconceptions or one of the kind of theories that I had is that you either had to be kind of mindful that you were in the product market fit exercise, getting research, or actually selling. And when we spoke with Mac recently, he was saying, no. What we did was gaining research, and then people started pulling our product when we were getting in, doing the research phase, and then it became clear that people wanted it by pulling it, and then we moved to more of a sales motion, and we're thoughtful about that. So I think that was a good learning for me. I'm here to learn. When you started doing that and getting research, how did that process go? Talk about that. Talking to your network, how you were testing the kind of theory and going through from a research to kind of a selling mode.
Yeah, I think that research sort of stage is an interesting one. I think ultimately when you're running that research, you have obviously key ideals that you want to test. Broadly, though, I do think you need to have like a strong opinion on what you're trying to solve for and what the solution is going to be. And it's ultimately sort of having that strong opinion on what you're building or what you will be building, and then testing the sort of the value props and the amount that you could charge for that. And so I agree in the sense that I think that research phase, like things start to come out of it. But broadly for us, it was always a matter of, okay, there are use cases that we think that this can be really valuable around. going to speak to people that are in that world, proposing something that sort of fits that kind of mold, and then getting traction, getting a feedback as to, okay, yes, that works, or that doesn't, or that the application of that would be interesting, and then figuring out, okay, if we charged you 500 quid a month, 2 grand a month for that kind of thing, like would you pay for that? And I think that gives you a pretty strong insight and signal from very on as to, okay, this is a segment where we can get pretty good traction on pretty early.
So was your research, the hypothesis was basically that there was the ability to use AI to generate, let's talk about meetings to start within different segments, and then you just tried to narrow it down to which segments, or was it a different hypothesis that you then had to narrow down to then realize it was different segments?
Initial hypothesis was that you can use AI to handle, I guess, like sort of research-led outreach. So being able to target the right person at the right company at the right time with the right message, and really sort of being able to leverage AI and agentic technology to be able to run research across all those different areas to be able to maximize your chances of getting in front of the right person to drive pipeline and new meetings. And I think really one of the things that we did see from the initial couple of months is that is the case. Undoubtedly that's the case like across vast majority of markets. Ultimately, really where we saw early traction and saw sort of a really close fit is that there are verticals and there are markets whereby they're pretty well serviced by the sales tooling in the market. If you're talking about sort of general sort of SaaS businesses in the market that are targeting finance firms or law firms, then actually the utilizing the Clays of the world and the Outreaches of the world and the HubSpot and Salesforce like platforms of the world, then really like they service a problem there, and the additional value add isn't as great as like to be able to say, okay, this is going to deliver enough value that you can really start to like build that repeatable process. And actually really where we've found that there are other verticals that have been underserved for a while where this technology actually starts to become super valuable, where we got that sort of immediate feedback and are starting to see the benefits of that now.
I like it. And that's just a general hypothesis across AI, is niching it down into different areas that aren't being kind of serviced by some of these more advanced technologies. Okay, so you picked these several niches that were pulled. It sounds like you were doing the research, testing your hypothesis, started being pulled by these various industries. What's kind of the next step? Once you picked these industries, how did you approach the next kind of pivoting from, hey, I think we have product market fit here, people are pulling this, to like, let's go acquire some customers in this space?
Yeah, I mean, you say it there. I think like acquiring first customers is the first step. I think that first oh shit moment is like, will someone actually pay for it? Like, will someone actually like send you money to your bank account for it?
It's
and
quite
that's
a quantitative, practical test. Exchange money for value. Will it actually happen?
For sure. But in the same vein that like have been in the scenario previously, that you can be proposing something and then someone can be on the journey of like, I would like be involved with that. Ultimately, until someone actually makes that transaction, then there's always the open question mark of like, do they have sign off from whoever may be? Like, is this actually something that like they're sort of fully committed to? And so I think very first step, sign first customer, money in the bank, and then really from that point forward is then being able to sort of work with those early customers to sort of nail down, okay, like what is the actual value that you're getting out of this, like what's the application of this, and sort of working with those early customers to ensure that actually the product you have is sort of a fit for those customers and actually sort of generates value, and then being able to sort of work on top of that.
You sound like a second-time founder. In the wisdom you've gained. Many people listening are first-time founders or aspiring founders. You make it sound obvious, but that research to payment, talk about a little bit more there on how did you go from research to actually, asking the question, or how did you approach that? How did you approach it differently this time around to be matter of fact of, are you going to pay for this, than you did the first time?
I think first time round, very much less clinical and less transactional, almost in terms of the commitment there. I think there's always as a I guess like founder-led salesperson, you always want to please your customers. You always want to like seem like it's something that is like that they're going to be happy with, and asking that difficult question and sort of getting that like definitive like yes or no basically is something that in the first time round, or not in the first time round, in the early days, that you sort of are tentative to really press on. And I think that's really I guess like sort of not even sort of second time round, but you do learn to actually get to the point where the yes or no. Because ultimately, there is that entire gap between in the middle where there's always the chance, there's always the sort of the possibility and the potential of the time when a deal you have in the pipeline that you think is like an absolute dead cert, and it's one of the 10% at the bottom end of the funnel that actually sort of comes out. And so it's, yeah, I think like being a lot more sort of clinical and asking those difficult questions around, okay, here's the contract or here's the payment link, like would you like pay us and we'll build it, or pay us and we'll onboard you tomorrow, or whatever the sort of that initial step of starting to deliver value for them. I think, yeah, get really asking that hard question, basically.
Yeah, I was teasing you about being a wizened second-time founder, but I do think that's one of the biggest challenges is you hold out hope that your idea will survive versus the second time you're going to battle test it immediately with practical exchange of value for money, and if they give it, you know it's good, we're onto something. If they don't, then you know you got to continue to iterate. I love it. So then more customers started giving you money. How did that impact kind of the development of your product and the kind of development of your hypothesis of where to head next?
Yeah, I think it's one where, I mean, ultimately, I guess very rarely in the scenario where every single one of your early customers is going to be a great fit. We definitely saw that with Dream in the sense that some of the early customers brought on, actually the I guess vision of what it can do was something that they sort of bought into. Practically, like, can you actually deliver sort of value for them is going to be sort of to varying different degrees of success there.
Yeah, there's no way you overpromised as a founder selling the vision of what it could do, and then reality set in. How did you
No, I
strike a
did.
balance on that, or did
I
you?
think no. I think again it's very much that. I mean, I think one of the almost like one of the I think great things about Dream where we sit in is like it is naturally quite a sort of transactional product in the sense that you are driving new business ultimately for these businesses. And so if at the end of the first 3 months, for example, you haven't driven any pipeline for them, then it's like pretty transactional. Like, okay, this hasn't necessarily sort of worked in line with expectations. So I think with that in mind and knowing that going into these conversations, going into deals, you're like, this is the vision of what the platform does. This is where it really adds value. This is where it would be successful under these certain conditions. And then you have that sort of scope set out, which very, very clearly I'd say, okay, if we deliver on this and these things are met, the likelihood of success and the likelihood of you getting value out of the product are high. Ultimately, again, like that value at the end of the day is going to be, we have some customers who are generating 50 grand's worth of pipeline in the first week, and we have other customers that their sales cycles are going to be longer, and ultimately the value they create might be 6 months down the line, or might be that they never get to the point of sort of realizing it. And so I think, yeah, being upfront with all of the conditions basically that surround your product and where it adds value, and making sure that that's very much laid out clearly and you're on the same page as the
Yeah.
customer is
So you're starting to
pretty
talk
crucial.
about ICP, right? As it applies also to not just who you should be selling into, but who you can actually service and who will be a good customer, right? Because obviously signing up customers who are going to be unhappy and churn is just a waste of time. How did you approach that in defining like how to identify a good prospect and then how to qualify in or out? And did you disqualify prospects that you just knew you couldn't do the work for?
Yeah, so I think obviously you start out pretty loose. So our ICP to start with Dream was companies that are looking to grow, and you'd like to think that that's the majority of companies. And then I think from that then gives you the opportunity to start working with companies and to figure out really sort of like what is that ICP that you can sort of nail that down into. And so that's, I think, that starting point that then allows you to say, there may be like customers, and we do have customers that will probably be a better fit in 6 months' time once we've sort of added more to the platform and things like that. Ultimately, it's about really nailing down like what's the ICP like right now that you can deliver value for, and working very closely from a internal perspective of like what the product does right now and what improvements need to make to drive value for those very initial sort of customers, and then also ensuring that you're clear on that and trying to bring more of those companies like into the funnel is a pretty cyclical sort of event that in the early days of business you are sort of speaking about that internally on a weekly daily basis.
So it sounds like, well, I wonder, at Impala, in your first company, were you as disciplined as disqualifying as you are now?
No, not at all. Yeah, I think we were. I think that the parameters of a funnel and how you qualify, disqualify, and how you determine sort of the business coming in. Like, I think that is definitely something that you become not necessarily stricter on, but clearer on. And I think it's clarity of not sort of cheating yourself. I've had times, I know I've sort of have conversations with other salespeople who you kid yourself into something that you could argue that sort of fits into like your ICP and fits into the funnel. Whereas if you actually are sort of brutally honest with yourself and intellectually honest with yourself, that probably really shouldn't be. And so, like, not kidding yourself, real honesty, real feedback, sort of internally on what should and what shouldn't be in the funnel is definitely something that you learn on and improve on over time.
Well, and I guess you're going to learn sooner or later, right? Because either you do it now and take the medicine and disqualify people, or you close them and then they churn and you've invested all this money and your lifetime value is shit.
For sure. And I think one of the big learnings there was actually the speed of taking things out of the funnel is like one of the things that I would say, like massively improved on.
How do you deliver that news to a prospect who wants to buy your product?
I think ultimately it's being very clear on like, are they buying like right now? Really, one of the things that, and actually it's one of the big value adds and value props of Dream itself is being able to sort of monitor that actually when engagement is at the point where they're sort of ready to buy.
Okay.
I think in the sense, like, let's say your target market is restaurants or is hotels or is SaaS companies, whatever it may be. Throughout the year, there are going to be sort of points in the year where they've just bought another piece of software, or they don't have the budget, or someone's just left the business, or any of these different things. But ultimately, like the time to buy date isn't right now. And I think getting to drilling down into the point, like, do you have the budget, the sign off, the resource, the time to actually buy this within the next 2 weeks, whatever time frame that is, depending on your sales cycle as a product, but really having clarity on like what those questions are and the time frame that you're looking to get a commitment to. And then once you have that time frame, then you'd be like, okay, well, if the time frame is the next 3 weeks, then we know that we should be sort of interacting on a every other day basis. And that really gives you
I love it.
The clarity to say, okay, well, now we know the time frame, we can go through the funnel and be like, okay, well, does this have the opportunity to close within the next 3 weeks, or have you spoken to this deal in the last 3 days? And if it's more than that, then you're like, okay, well, why haven't you? Like, and if it's one of the reasons, like, okay, well, it has the opportunity of closing in 4 months' time, like, okay, well, take it out and bring it back in 4 months' time. And so I think it's
you run a real tight pipeline. We've come a long way.
Come a long way.
We've come a long way. So that was one part of the question. The other one was, if you don't think it's a good fit for your product, how do you disqualify those people out? Like, how do you deliver that message?
It's a good question. I think, again, it's in I think, getting to the point where that's clear. I think it's getting clarity on internally, but also clarity on their side. And so I think scoping out of really what the product does and what value it's going to provide to them ultimately should put you in a position whereby you are able to say, okay, like this is what we do. This is going to be the output of the product. This is going to be deliverables, and this is the return on investment there. That gets to a point where the customer is still like, yeah, I want to pay you 10 grand. Ultimately, then that's a question that you can then take internally and be like, okay, do we want to, like, is that value high enough for a customer that may potentially churn in 3 months' time? And then internally you can be like, yeah, like our margin on that is X, or our margin on that is negative, and in which case you're like, no, it's not one we should take on. So I think just getting to that point of clarity on like really like what the scope is, what the return on investment is, what the expectations are, and then and being clear on that on both sides, internally and on the customer's front, and then you can make decisions from there.
The reason I'm smiling is because I think that I work with so many different levels of seniority with various salespeople and different companies. And you see the junior folks don't do what you just said. They keep it kind of fuzzy because there's like hope in there if they haven't gotten to like the deep truth of like, is what they're looking for really what we can do? And do they know it? And are we really aligned? Like that, it takes like, no, explain it deeper. Let's keep peeling back the layers to get to the core of the truth of what you're really looking for to see if this is a fit. I think it's like, it's clear that you get that and you have such limited time. So wasting time on things that are fuzzy and hopefully will close is just a waste. But it's also like a mark of a good senior sales rep to be ultra qualifying and deep in the alignment, versus junior folks tend to keep it rather fuzzy, don't peel back those layers, don't really have that tough conversation of like, what do you really looking for? What is success? Can we really do that? Like, is this really a fit? Versus like, yeah, it feels like a fit. Sign the contract. We'll see what happens. Or let me send you a contract. Think about, cross the
Yeah, yeah.
fingers. Maybe they'll buy it. That's awesome. And so, as I teased earlier, so it's starting to work. You're acquiring customers, and you've hired how many? 100 sales reps so far, humans in the
Yeah,
seats. So how many
100.
salespeople do you have now?
So we have tens of sales agents that are working on Dream, working for Dream, and I am the salesperson that manages them essentially.
So you're the sales human managing many sales agents.
I am indeed.
How's
It
that
was
feel to manage an army of AI agents?
they're extremely efficient and
Are you Mr. Smith?
no, as well. It's again. So with Dream, so one of the things that we actually insert in our inception agreement is that we have a cap on 20 humans in the company, and
Okay.
there will be accompanied by an army of agents that allow us to sort of really grow the business in whichever sort of area of business that may be. And so at the moment, predominantly that is an army of sales agents that are doing that top of funnel list building, running research, prospecting, running outreach, retargeting, and really sort of putting Dream AI out there into the world of saying, okay, these are the target markets that we should be targeting, putting new business in, running the initial qualification over email, sort of scheduling, and that is all handled by agents behind the scenes that we monitor, and ultimately then sort of pulls a call into the calendar. That is then the handover point to human Charlie.
Human Charlie. I like that. What are you when we first met? Well, not first met. When we first started talking about Dream, you were exploring audio. How far has it come with AI on the phone?
So we haven't rolled it out yet. It's one of the things. Technically, I would say it's viable with some caveats there. So, for example, speaking to an agent over the phone that is speaking English but in a different accent, it passes, whereas speaking English in an English accent, you can kind of just pick up on it. So in its simplest form, I think it is viable in the sense that you could start to roll out voice from a.
So, sorry, what you're saying is fascinating. So, if I'm calling you with AI, I should use an American accent because your accent isn't like you're not going to pick up on the subtleties of an American accent the way. And if you're calling me, it should be in a British accent. Okay.
Exactly.
So,
The
if Charlie
subtleties in the
calls me, it might be
pattern.
AI Charlie. Damn,
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
never know.
Yeah, and so I think really from our side, so we've rolled out the initial stages of our sort of omni-channel sort of sales agent, go-to-market agent that allows us to give companies that from a voice perspective. Technically there's some improvements there. I think actually the other thing from our side is really figuring out the use case that it can be applied, both in terms of where there's demand for, but also in terms of from a public perspective and from a moral perspective, like really where we see it being. Where we see sort of the world going in that front. So, do I see AI sales agents doing sort of cold outbound to the entire world? Personally, I don't see that. I think that will be legislated out like pretty quickly. But can you really leverage that kind of technology and the ability to use calling agents to be able to handle inbound leads, for example, or to be able to handle sort of invoicing queries from customers? Then I think in those very specific use cases, will be the area where we sort of really start to explore and start to implement sort of calling agents.
So, going deeper down the sales funnel potentially, but also in specific use cases for running the business on the customer service side.
Yeah, I think in the scenarios where it's pretty clear that ultimately sort of leveraging that kind of technology is going to save the business time, resource, and give the ability to really focus on other areas that you can sort of really drive value in. I think those kind of use cases is really where you'll see actual value. And again, being very specific from a use case per vertical is going to be sort of the thing that ultimately drives value for customers.
When you get the meeting scheduled in your calendar, do people ever know that they've been engaging with AI or mention it?
So they ask the question in terms of obviously when you pitch, and so this is what we do, and you put a screen up of similar kind of email and so the email chain of it being scheduled, and then they're like, wait, so was it AI that I was talking to?
I love it.
That is a
Yeah.
genuine question that I reckon I
Did
get
it work?
60, 70, 75% of the time when people jump on. And it genuinely is the scheduling part of Dream is one of the most impressive parts of it. the ability for it to really handle context, tone of voice, and then to sort of handle the back and forth of sort of scheduling with two different calendars it saves me hours and hours on a weekly basis. And like I say, the sort of people jump on the phone to sort of take that business meeting and take that meeting, and you're like, they had absolutely no idea.
That's a good meta use case to be like, you just used the product. Did you like it? And did you even realize what was going on?
Well, that's the thing, and it's not even sort of the scheduling back and forth. It's the initial outreach. That entire chain from initial outreach to calling the calendar, entirely taken on by agents, is a nice, like you say, trigger to be like, okay, now I entirely get the value of this, and like imagine what that could do for my business, basically.
Yes. And then you, Mr. Smith, are the bottleneck here. How are you managing that with having all of these AI agents booking your meetings, filling your calendar? What happens next? I mean, you sadly are human. You will run out of time. What will be the next step in kind of the phases of your commercial growth?
So I think twofold. First of all, like one of the things that we've actually learnt over the course of the last couple of months is that the surfaces that sales teams like to engage with technology is fundamentally shifting. That has a direct impact on the sort of quantity of funnel and pipeline that you can handle. So we started, for example, with Dream AI being a desktop browser that people would have to log into and go through and handle to take an overview of the deals and prospects coming through, and to sort of set in place like new campaigns to target new markets, whatever it may be. Ultimately, that is something that, no matter, like, especially true for sort of SMBs and the verticals we're going after, but is broadly true for pretty much every vertical, that really sort of a salesperson's ability and adherence to CRMs and to like really sort of being on top of the tech is generally pretty low. And so we've shifted the surface away from being a desktop browser onto being through WhatsApp. So you literally now sort of get notifications of sort of new deals coming through on WhatsApp, and you get notification of someone who you outreached to last week is now visiting your website. Here's their phone number. You should give them a call. You've had a question come in from this particular prospect. Here's the email that we've drafted. Are you okay to send that through? Yes or no. I want to change it this way. Automatically it's generating sort of an updated version of it. So really shifting the surface to WhatsApp, which what we've seen is like literally doubles the productivity of sort of salespeople and their ability to sort of handle pipeline.
So you've turned yourself into kind of a cyborg super rep that can do far more because you're using AI and technology, and the expectations from clients are that they probably prefer not to talk to a human all the time except for a few brief moments.
Exactly that. So I think without calling myself a cyborg, I think
I've called you a lot of names today, Charlie, obviously. Maybe too comfortable.
I think it's if you can really sort of give people the ability to actually leverage like the full power of the technology, that's where like we've seen that shift at being like particularly sort of I guess like it moves the needle.
How much of it is your own technology versus technology you're adopting or buying to help support your pipeline management?
Well, great questions. Dream AI, for example, I think is like it's one of my favorites. Like on WhatsApp, I got my girlfriend, and I got my business partner, and I've got Dream AI, the sort of the sales assistant. Those are the sort of the three main sort of conversations I have on WhatsApp, and I think like that
The Dream
compares.
is supporting you further down the funnel, though.
So at the moment, we very much deploy it to top of funnel, getting to the point where
Yeah.
the route we're going is that we'll then start to introduce the ability for it to come like slightly further, not only further down the funnel, but also introduce it to other aspects of commercial and business life. So you can imagine a world whereby, because the platform, because the system has the intelligence and the context on which customers you have and how you talk about them and what the products you sold is, actually then you can imagine a world whereby it starts to be able to handle invoicing, and you'll get a WhatsApp one day being like, Seth hasn't paid you the invoice for this month. Do you want me to send a chaser to him? Like, yeah, sure. Like, do that for the 100 others, like, for example. And so there are plenty of other use cases that we can start to sort of move into that are both further down the funnel, but also sort of in the wider sort of commercial scope, that really ultimately sort of moves us into that world whereby humans start to like level up their ability to operate powered by agents.
I love it. I also think, going back to, like you said, the surface area in which prospects engage with the product, I think that's a kind of a fascinating, it's a little bit of product-led growth kind of mindset that you can get further down the funnel where the client is doing more engagement with your product, requiring less human interaction and less sales efforts, thus requiring fewer humans, but better product to help kind of guide them through the experience so that they're experiencing it without a human having to kind of go through demo decks and demos and all that stuff. So it's like it's benefiting you in two ways.
Yeah, completely.
And you've been super generous with your time, so I'm going to get you out of here. Last question. What is probably the worst sale as a founder-led sales leader, expert, two-time founder? What's kind of the biggest bit of advice that you've received around sales that you think is just shitty?
Shitty. I always thought that never take no for an answer is one that sort of when you like go into sales, like in the first instance, that sort of you get drilled like never take no for an answer, and I think it's one of the things that like does my head in because ultimately like it's a great way to burn bridges and to ultimately sort of close off pipeline. It really it's like again like an understanding of sort of like of buying cycles and how sort of actually sort of deals come and go, an ability to sort of manage that, to be able to get information in. Ultimately, in the long term, you're going to build better networks, build better pipeline, close more deals, earn more cash, all of the above.
That's a great answer. It makes for great content on LinkedIn, though, when someone says no and then the rebuttal is just over the top, outrageous. They think I'm going to respond positively to this and then buy the product. Like, this is outrageous. Well, Charlie, thank you so much for your time. Excited to see the journey, learn more. Hopefully we can get you back, and congrats on your success.
Thanks for having me, man.
Take care, man.
Yeah.